Hello everyone, welcome to Snapple Pass on the Red Snapper channel. My name is MJ. This is a series where we look at the new card each week and we discuss everything about it. So Spotlight Week that is in, deck list ideas, counters, all of the awesome juicy stuff. Today we're looking at Toxin. He's a 2/1. On reveal, return your other cards here to your hand, plus 2 power for each returned. You can use the chapters in the timeline if you want to skip to a specific section. This is if you're rude and you don't want to watch the whole video. That is a joke. I make it most times. I need to stop doing it because it is starting to become not funny, if it ever was even funny in the first place. Right, let's talk about the Spotlight Cash and the other cards that Toxin is with. So, very interesting one here because he's alongside Zabu, who is a Series 4 card and who was very recently changed. Now a 1/2, and it's an on reveal, reduce the cost of 4 cost cards in your deck by 1. So it doesn't affect cards in your hand, which, fine, it has to have some kind of downside. However, 1 cost cards that reduce the cost of other cards, specifically targeted ones like Zabu, are very powerful. And actually, I think since Zabu's change, there hasn't been masses of experimentation with him yet, because there's been so many interesting and cool cards that we haven't seen masses and masses of Zabu deck ideas. So we'll look at Zabu in one of our Toxin decks later. But yeah, I think he's a very cool card and I really like this change. And Elsa Bloodstone, listen guys, I'm an Elsa Bloodstone fan. I like the silky smooth style decks, which certainly won't call Inda Club anymore. We used to call it Inda Club because Inda Club you mingle, mingle rhymes with Pringle, and Pringle comes in a stack. And that's what you want to do with these styles of decks. You want to stack them in one location, my friend Gossi crawls in his skin, or his skin crawls, crawls in his skin. That's not a phrase. If he thought it was cringe before, he'll think this is frame break. Right, nah, that's an early frame break to do. I can't frame break that early. You're trying to get the viewers on side here. But yeah, generally, not a bad week. Honestly, not a bad week. We used to think this was I will say I don't like the Zabu variant, to be honest. I'm not crazy about the artwork on it. But actually, I think this week is alright. Not the best value with a Series 4 in there, but hey, it's cool. Anyway, let's move on to the mechanics. You may look at this card, Toxin, and think, oh, it's exclusively a bounce card. But actually, I think there's definitely opportunities for Toxin outside of bounce. And even just outside of, even just utilising that bounce element or planning to utilise that bounce element. When you consider elements like Clog, like when Clog is a big mainstay in the meta, like it kind of has fallen off a little bit at the time of recording because White Widow, one of the best Clog cards, fell off a lot. She got a nerf and she is, I mean, I said that she deleted her, I said that they deleted her from the game. I thought she was that weak now, but actually I had an opponent play something really spicy on me this week, which was Armor and White Widow, and that felt disgusting, and that's actually something that I want to experiment with. Anyway, yeah, of course it is a bounce card primarily, and that is what you're going to be doing, and that's certainly the decks that we'll look at today. But don't completely discount Toxin in other styles of decks. I think particularly there's an opportunity for Toxin in Mill, which would be kind of like a Mill bounce style deck, but we'll look at that of course as well. This is the second bounce card that is specific to the location, so it can create an infinite or a theoretical infinite loop. Alongside Beast, who is the other card that bounces cards at that location, they can bounce each other, and we'll actually see that again in one of the decks that we'll look at in a minute. And this is the cheapest way to bounce non-1 cost cards, and technically it's the joint cheapest way to bounce 1 cost cards, because obviously Falcon already does a great job of specifically bouncing 1 cost cards. Toxin's going to be able to do the same thing at the same cost, just, you know, at specific to a location. Now, before we continue, I've got a bone to pick with you. Why aren't you subscribing to my damn channel? In fact, 3,400 people watched my last Snapple Pass video. Half of you aren't subscribed. Don't you know my video that I've got planned for 2,099 subscribers, where I'm going to absolutely embarrass myself? I'm putting my embarrassment on the line for you guys. Please subscribe. Thank you. So pros, as we said, nice anti-clog element to this card. If they're throwing goblins over to your side or rocks, you can just scoop them back up, make plenty of room, and also gain the bonus from actually removing them as well. He's got a really good output, even if you just consider bouncing 2 cards. Toxin becomes a 2/5. Now, of course, you lose the power from those cards that you're bouncing, but if they were 2 power each, or they had a strong on reveal effect, maybe Spider Ham, Toxin flings the Spider Ham back into your hand, and actually you've gained power by doing that play, so that would be pretty cool. And then he himself can be bounced, so like if you bounced 2 cards and he's a 2/5, that's certainly not his limit. You can bounce him again with Beast and make even more gains. He'll give huge consistency to the bounce archetype. I think on Toxin's debut, I think bounce will obviously be very strong, especially when you consider the season pass card this month is Agent Venom, which did wonders for the bounce archetype. A very strong deck with so many bounce cards being a low power, and the point of them is that they grow in power, like Hit Monkey, well, Sage, I guess, in particular, Rocket Raccoon, Silver Sable. There's a really interesting element here to... Sorry, I've worded that incredibly badly, but Agent Venom gives them a really big power, and then Toxin can make them repeat their effects to make them grow even further. So it's an additional element for bounce, which is really strong. And as I said earlier as well, has potential outside of bounce. The ability to replay cheap, strong on reveals is really good. Don't underestimate that. Is this guy like somewhat of a Grandmaster? Grandmaster is a 2/3, allows you to repeat on reveals. Toxin's going to fling them back to your hand, so still a 2/3 if you're doing one card, but the crucial thing with Toxin is he can do multiple cards. So you can bounce multiple cards. Of course, you do need to then replay them if you want to, of course. So there's considerations. And cons. He's potentially a weak final turn play, unless you're avoiding a Shang-Chi play, so you might have a really high IQ element where you've got a 10 power card and you're going to sling it back into your hand because you know they're going to play Shang-Chi. I mean, that's a very sort of niche scenario. Don't think that's going to happen too often, but you could use it to get rid of goblins, a hobgoblin in like a Galactus Ting. However, the little addendum to that is like this could be like the second time you're playing Toxin, and if you play Toxin first, like maybe you did sling Toxin back into your hand as even just a 2/3 with Beast. If you play Toxin down as the first card of that location, it's still just a 2/3, and then you may have some really powerful other cards, like you may have like an already jacked Silver Sable. You can get that down. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose that location, just something to consider, and a little bit difficult because you are bouncing cards. It can sometimes be difficult. Like we all hate playing that bounce deck and top decking Falcon on the final turn. It will probably be a similar feeling with Toxin. And there's some firm counters, albeit not really more than any other card on average, but there are some definitive counters that would definitely mess up the location that Toxin is at. So we'll talk about them in a minute. So I thought that was going to be, that sounded like I was about to say we'll talk about them now, but I forget we've added locations to this series. So let's talk about the good and bad locations. Good, Shuri's Lab, obviously duplicating the power of, wrong word to use, doubling the power. So Toxin gains, maybe you've played a couple of cards on Shuri's Lab who themselves have doubled in power. You play the Toxin down from a 2/5, it goes to a 2/10. Yes, weak to Shang-Chi potentially. However, you gained essentially this kind of double benefit of not only doubling the cards that you've played at Shuri's Lab, but also doubling Toxin, and it then allows you to share that extra power from the cards that you've bounced in the other locations. Crazy. Consider locations that clog your side / locations. So Savage Land, Central Park, these things can be very frustrating, especially if they come mid-game, like it's the second or third location that is revealed. Toxin's going to be able to not only get the benefit of flinging them back into your hand and making room, but actually gaining power, especially in the case of these squirrels and these raptors, these small power cards. Toxin's going to gain that extra +2 for each. So really good, like going to be particularly good on Savage Land. And cloning Vats, you're going to be wanting to bounce multiple times, or you're certainly going to be able to bounce multiple times in these styles of Toxin bounce decks. And having a jacked power bouncer from Cloning Vats. Like Cloning Vats, if Cloning Vats is the first revealed location, you Silver Sable on there on 1, you could absolutely happily Toxin on there on 2, and then on turn 3 you can do your 1/3 Silver Sable, play that down, it becomes a 1/5 and goes into your hand, and then you play the Toxin, who is a 2/3, becomes a 2/5 because he's bouncing the other Toxin and the Silver Sable. yeah, it gets out of hand real fast. Bad locations would include things like Atalan. You want to bounce stuff into your deck, it's going to shuffle everything into your deck, so that's bad. Mojo World, it's going to be difficult unless, as we said earlier, you're playing Toxin as like the first card of that location, or you're doing it mid-game, like you've already started off your bounce on there, you ping them back, you can reclaim at the end, but just a difficult thing. Muir Island, it's somewhere where you want to put cards into, not take them out. Grand Central takes away your control, so you may have cards there and you don't want to ping them back. You sort of, in those situations, you may want to ensure that you play out your Toxin before Grand Central can pull it. And Dark Dimension, of course, messing your plans completely. Counters, of course, Cosmo is just going to straight up stop the on-reveals of your cards, especially as a bounce deck will have so many on-reveals in. Shadow King, I mean, it feels like in the last couple of months, Shadow King has never been removed from this slide. He's obviously going to reduce not only the power of Toxin at the location that he's at, but again, you're playing a bounce deck. You've probably got the likes of Rocket Raccoon, Silver Saber. Sorry, I just said there you're playing a bounce deck, but I made specific points earlier in this video about the fact that he is not exclusively a bounce card. It's just naturally that's where the conversation is going to lead. You may not be playing an exact bounce deck, sorry. Anyway, Shadow King going to not only reduce Toxin himself back down to that 1 power, but also you may have other cards like Sable Sage that he's going to be able to reduce as well. So if you're playing in the same location, just always be wary. Spread out your cards. Well, you know, if you suspect they have a Shadow King, spread out your cards that gain power. Sandman is going to increase the cost of cards next turn. That's what he does now, right? Increase the cost of cards by 1. So that's going to be cringe and embarrassing if you're playing a bounce deck. You're going to be able to play like pretty much half as many cards as you were going to before. And Master Mold. This is the first time that Master Mold has appeared on this counter slides since I've been doing the Snap or Pass series, which Drewbury kindly gave me permission to basically steal the name. So thank you. Oh, a never-ending thank you to him. Anyway, it's the first time that Master Mold's appeared. Master Mold is going to stick 2 Sentinels in your hand. So when you're trying to bounce cards back into it, you may not be able to bounce as many as you think if they're playing the Master Mold. By the way, Collector's Vault is coming to the game. This is a way to get variants that they previously featured in bundles, and they're going to be selling them at 3 price ranges. I think it's like 1,500 gold, 2,100 gold, and like 2,500 gold. It's something like that. But anyway, one of the cards I missed out on is this Kim Jacinto Master Mold. Oh my god, it's stunning. I hope I get to buy it one day. We'll see. Anyway, let's move on to key synergies and deck ideas. We've already spoken about some of these key synergies, but there's some that we haven't. Silver Sable is obviously incredible. For my money, she's the best 1-drop in the game. And if you can replay her effect, she's just even better. Like, incredible. Iceman, bloody annoying little bastard. Being able to replay his effect is good. Rocket Raccoon, obviously, been there, done that same thing. We've spoken about Agent Venom. Let's talk about Nico Minoru. Nico Minoru is particularly strong with Toxin. Consider the abilities that Nico Minoru gives. There's so many that work well with like a bounce archetype. So consider the one where she gives the card +2, the one where she gives herself +2, or the one where she doubles herself. Being able to duplicate that from bounce is crazy because 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. So that's outrageous. But also the adding a copy. You see this in Destroy decks with Toxin's dads, Venom and Carnage, right? Getting a copy of them that is a buffed up version is super strong. Especially with a Venom, it's like a snap condition. Maybe the same thing could be said for a Toxin, perhaps. And Beast we've spoken about as well. Here's several deck ideas for you. Now, just a heads up, guys, we do have a Google Docs document that is in the description to this video, and every video that I do, probably. No, so I don't know why I said probably. Like I should know, and yeah, it is. We'll say that. Anyway, this Google Docs document has got a list of every deck that I share on Snap or Pass, separated by character or card. So it's really easy to view, and it's open to everyone. You can just go in there and copy it. I mean, it's not open to it. Like, you can't edit it. Don't go in there and add like pictures of like dicks that you've drawn. I don't think I would do that. I'm projecting on you. I'm not saying you would do that. I apologise. I'm sorry. Anyway, this first deck is Loop Bounce. So this somewhat considers the infinite loop that I spoke about earlier. Of course, it's not an infinite loop because there's only 3, 6, or 7 turns in the game, or 4. There's either 3, 4, 6, or 7 turns in the game, just depending on what locations you've got and what game mode you're playing. High voltage, TVA, games, and limbo. But yeah, so it's finite. It's a finite loop. Fine. Anyway, you have got those incredibly cracked, repeatable effects like Nico Minoru and Silver Sable in particular. I think those two are going to feel absolutely crazy. Being able to bounce them more than once is going to be crazy. Like, that honestly actually does make me feel sick thinking about that. Nico into like Silver Sable. I mean, just consider the playing line, right? Nico on 1, let's say she's had a copy. You play Toxin on 2, and then so now you've got 2 Toxins who are, or rather you've got a Toxin in your hand which is 2/3, you've got one on the board which is 2/3. Your turn 3 could simply be Beast at that point. Send them both back to your hand. They're now 1 cheaper, so Nico's 3, Toxin's 1. Boom, then you do some absolutely crazy like Silver Sable, Iceman, Toxin, and then you still have time to replay these effects, especially like Iceman, where you want to get him out sort of earlier rather than later. You still have your chance to replay these. And then on top of doing all of that, you probably will still have energy left over where you can Black Swan, and then on the final turn, slam down like a rocket. I mean, maybe a Hawkeye just because you need to get the numbers, and a Hit Monkey and a Sage. Like, genuinely really crazy power potential here. The ability to do these things multiple times. And actually, that's why I've got all the bounce cards in this deck as well. We've got Falcon in here too, because cards like Nico and Silver Sable are so incredibly strong to be able to duplicate, that duplicating them multiple times is still really good. Love it. Buffs decks. This is a deck which focuses on re-triggering buffs. The key cards that you'd want to re-trigger buffs on, again, Silver Sable and Nico Minoru. We have got America Chavez in here. It is a little bit copy. I would agree if you accuse me of that. We can repeat these effects not only with the bounce cards, but we've also got Grandmaster in here. And we've got, really the ones that you want to repeat is actually Fastos and Gwenpool. And you may think, this is getting too late in the game. You seriously want me to bounce Gwenpool? Yes, I do, because we've also got Magic. So your turn 3 is Magic, you're extending the game. Your turn 4 is Gwenpool. Let's say on that Gwenpool location you've already played, maybe a Koye on 2, America Chavez on 1. You can bounce them back with Beast or Toxin on turn 5. Replay them all on turn 6, and then on turn 7 you could have some really surprising plays. You may consider about how do you actually get that much power out of this, because thus far we've not really played cards that are that high in power. We don't really seem to have the ability to get very high here. And I counter that by saying we've got Martyr, one of the best cards in the game. You play her somewhere and just make sure that she can't move anywhere else, because in those other locations you've got like Sage, or you just blocked off and stuff. Maybe you block one location with the Sage, which makes sense because you want 3 other cards there. Make sure that Martyr can't move there, and then you try and win one of the other locations with the considerance that Martyr may well bloody move the little wench. Or otherwise you just play down your other really high cards. You know, you've pumped 24... No? Yes, you've pumped 12 power into your hand. That is not insignificant. 24 is not as significant as 24, which is what I said a minute ago. But hey, guys, strange things could happen. You could bounce Gwenpool twice. What if you've got Elysium, you play Gwenpool on 3, bounce them on 4 with Toxin, blah blah blah. You know what I'm getting at. Anyway, and finally, maybe the most interesting one here, because I think the bounce decks with Toxin in largely write themselves, to be honest. I mean, this re-trigger buffs deck certainly didn't write itself. You'd have to be a lunatic to write that one. But maybe this Mill deck is a little bit more interesting. I called it Mega Drain Mill, and this focuses on really draining your opponent's deck. We don't have cards like Silver Sable in here, or like Cassandra Nova, for example, because we're actually going to be stealing our opponent's cards, and we're actually going to be relying quite a bit on our opponent's cards. If you look at this deck, we've got the likes of Yondu and Iceman, so we're destroying cheap cards in their deck and freezing their hand, which are effects that we're going to want to duplicate as well. We have got the Zabu, so because we've got several very key like 4-cost cards in our deck here. We've got Absorbing Man, Symbiote Spider-Man and Shang-Chi. So Symbiote Spider-Man and Absorbing Man are going to be able to copy the effects. I would say we want to copy things like Cable and maybe Baron Zemo. Like Baron Zemo would be a good one with Absorbing Man, especially if we have played things like Yondu or Yondu twice. We may have played Yondu twice to really suck out all of those 1-cost cards and maybe a 2-cost card or whatever from their deck, and it makes your Baron Zemo much more higher value. We've got the magic in here again to extend the game because we're draining them. We want to make sure that they haven't got anything. But you may notice that we don't actually have anything in our deck that is massive in power. That is why we do rely on their deck so much. So we've got Cable and we've got Baron Zemo to pull cards from them, and hopefully we can utilise them to try and consider to play the game, along with, of course, the Shang-Chi. So we're going to be destroying their high cards and then scrambling together a win with the stuff that we've stolen from them. So I think this is really cool. Some really interesting lines in this deck, for example, even if you take away the bounce sort of element from it. Zabu into Grandmaster. If you haven't drawn any of your 4-cost cards, Zabu into Grandmaster is going to feel absolutely incredible. That's going to be very strong on its own. It would allow you to do a Shang-Chi and Absorbing Man on the final turn without even having to extend the game with magic. So there are those kinds of elements and lines. And there's just interesting stuff here. Like Yondu Iceman into a Beast is going to be good. Like even just Yondu into Toxin is a really good way to get the mill elements rolling. You can simply then play like the Yondu, and then it makes your turn for Baron Zemo extra spicy. Which decks, apart from Zoo and like Athena decks, which decks play more than like a couple of 1-drops? So that makes that turn 4 Baron Zemo that you play pull in at the very least a 2-cost card, maybe even higher. So it's really interesting, and yeah, any opportunity to play Baron Zemo I'll take, to be honest. Let's move on to the star ratings. Overall, I think Toxin is a 4-star card. I think he's very good. I think he's going to debut very strong. Within the archetype, I mean, he's one of the best cards in the archetype. He's one of the key pieces, and he allows and creates this potential infinite loop. So he's definitely 5 stars in the archetype, in my humble opinion. Do I think he's better than Beast? Probably not. If I were comparing the two, I'd say probably not, because Beast allows you to do a little bit more, but then the combination of both of them together is really the match made in heaven, so it's interesting to consider. Fun, I've given him a 3.5. I think he's definitely like above average. Not the most fun card in my humble opinion. There won't be too many Endolphins at play here. I think replaying Sable might feel good, so maybe there's that element, but yeah, and then competitive wise, this is a really hard one to rate competitive wise. I've given him 4 stars from the competitive angle. I do think he's going to push bounce really far, to be fair, but I'm not sure if it's going to be overpowered. We'll see. There's a lot of tools to deal with it, is the thing. Like, you've got Killmongers, you've got Shadow Kings, so the tools to deal with bounce are there. So anyway, ultimately, is Toxin a snap or pass? I do think he's a snap. I think he's a very good card. I think he's really good, phenomenal in bounce, and like I say, I think the opportunity outside of bounce shouldn't be underestimated. Now, I don't actually know if I'm getting him, to be honest. I'm still up in the air. If I were getting him, I would be rolling keys. I've already got the other cards, so it's a big gamble for me. I don't know, but then the sort of main consideration that I've got is that I love symbiotes. You obviously saw that clip of my action figures earlier, and you would have seen all of the symbiotes in the background. I am a massive symbiotes fan, and so not only is that a consideration for simply owning Toxin, and I think the base art is incredible, but consider future spotlights. What if Toxin comes up in a future spotlight and I'm like, oh my god, the spotlight variant is insane and I really want that spotlight variant? If I don't have the base card, that then makes that a really difficult week to actually try and get the card. So, it's a tough one, guys. I'm up in the air. I can't really afford it, but we'll see. I don't know. What should I do? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. I need to take a drink of water. My throat is getting dry. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Weird.